Joseph Parker's next two opponents have been announced. Thanks to everyone who tweeted me, Facebooked me to let me know. I do really appreciate that. The first opponent is a guy called Daniel Martz, who goes by the nickname of The Mountain. That fight will be taking place on December the 5th, 2015, so less than a month away. The second opponent, Jason Bergman, will be taking place January the 23rd. So what this tells you, Parker's staying busy. They obviously don't expect Daniel Martz to be much trouble because they wouldn't book a fight so soon after, 6-7 weeks after, if they thought it was going to be a tough fight. Obviously, if there was a hand injury or a cut or, the fight went a full distance, 6-7 weeks may not be deemed enough time to recover. So Parker's team must be fairly confident of securing victory. But they're keeping their man active. And obviously he's going to be in the gym over the Christmas period, which I know a lot of boxers don't like to do. But realistically, if he's boxing January the 23rd, he's going to have to be in training during Christmas period. So he won't be able to let the celebrations and festivities get too out of hand. Now, the initial reaction, and this is based on my personal social media, so I appreciate that my social media footprint isn't big enough for it to be a true test of the public imagination, but the initial reaction to these two fights seems to be negative. There isn't a lot of excitement over the two opponents. The response has been somewhat underwhelming, and I think it's fair to say that the public, from what I've seen, have reacted with an element of disappointment and are slightly uninspired by these two opponents. So briefly, I'm going to talk through their records, talk through who they are, what they bring to the table, and then we can make an assessment as to how disappointing this news is. What I would say is neither of them are opponents who I'm overly aware of. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I've had time to watch their back catalogue of fights and see how they've performed. So there may be people who know them stylistically better than I do. What I will endeavour to do is to look them up, watch them in full details, and make fully informed pre-fight predictions, as and when I'm able to do that. But right now, I'm more going to talk about the opponents' resumes, rankings, etc., and look at it from that perspective. So first things first, Daniel Martz, who Parker will be facing on December the 5th. Nickname is The Mountain because he's 6'8". He's the tallest opponent Parker's going to be in with. He's 24 years old, so he's a young guy, and he is clearly a very, very big man, 6'8". I've always thought for a heavyweight on the way up, having experience of fighting big opponents is so key. Obviously Vladimir Klitschko and Deontay Wilder are towards the top of the heavyweight division right now. You've got guys like Tyson Fury, who aren't far off. I know a lot of people talk about Anthony Joshua fighting Joseph Parker one day. Realistically, Joseph Parker's in a division of giants, and if he's going to get towards the top of that division, having experience against fighting such a tall, big man is going to be helpful. It can only help. Now, the fact that Daniel Martz is 6'8" and nicknamed The Mountain means he certainly ticks that box. How skilled he is, it appears that he doesn't have the same capability as the truly class big men. You could argue it would have been more beneficial for Parker to fight the likes of a Tony Thompson or an Alexander Ustinov, but nevertheless, it's one sort of ingredient in the build of a heavyweight prospect. So Daniel Martz on BoxRec is rated the 123rd heavyweight in the world. So I'd imagine he's ranked some way below the likes of, and I haven't looked this up, but I'd certainly have Cali Meehan, Bowie Tupu, Jason Petaway. I'd have those guys above him in terms of where BoxRec have ranked him, certainly. His resume, 14 wins, 11 by knockout, 2 losses, 1 by knockout, and 1 draw. So, he's 24 years old. He's still at the start of his career. This is by far his the biggest fight of his career. One of the things that concerned me is I looked into his losses, and one of the losses was against Grover Young. Grover Young is a relatively well-known journeyman club fighter type. I think he's actually got a losing record. So if he's beating Daniel Martz, doesn't bode well. I think the positives with Daniel Martz is he's very, very big and he's young. You know, he's someone who's going to come in with ambition. He's going to want to make a statement, and this is his big opportunity at making some waves in the heavyweight division. Do I see it as a difficult fight? No. You know, clearly the guy can crack a bit. He's got 11 knockouts against 14 wins. Anyone who's 6'8" and that big can hurt a little bit. But without having watched too much of his tape, it doesn't look like a competitive fight. You know, he's already got 2 losses and a draw against his record. Joseph Parker would probably slaughter Grover Young if they ever fought, and Grover Young beat this guy. Now, I know it doesn't work like that. Just because fighter A beats fighter B doesn't mean he's going to beat the next guy, etc. Styles make fights, and that's why I will promise to do a further video of him watch the tapes. But not the most inspiring of opponent, I think we can say that. I guess the benefit is it keeps Parker busy. Next, on January the 23rd, Parker will face Jason Bergman, slightly higher rated than box rate. This guy's rated at 75, and it will be the first southpaw that Joseph Parker has been in with. Now, the only thing that's disappointing about this fight is there was a lot of talk, you know, 3 or 4 weeks ago about Parker fighting a top 10 southpaw, and his team seemed to be hyping that up a bit and hyping up the fact that they're going in against a real classy southpaw. So I did a video where I was looking at possible contenders, you know, Tony Thompson, I think I said Francisco Pianetta. We were talking that level of opponent, and you know, Jason Bergman really doesn't tick that box. He's got 11 losses on his record, and he's been stopped 4 times. He's an experienced operator. You know, he's 31 years old, 25 wins, 16 of those by knockout, so he can hit a little bit. 11 losses, 4 by knockout, and 2 draws. But it's uninspiring, isn't it? You know, uninspiring. This is a guy who's been KO'd by Seth Mitchell. This is a guy who's been KO'd by Nagy Aguilera. This is a guy who's been KO'd by Bowie Tupu. Not only does he seem like the kind of guy you can knock out, he's also been outpointed by Nikolai Furfa, which perhaps isn't the best sort of boxing form in the book. I think the other thing, Jason Bergman, I know he's ranked 75, which is comparatively high. I went through his resume. The guy hasn't actually been beyond 6 rounds in a fight before. So this is a step up for him. This is a step up for him. And for me, it's another guy who Parker really should be dealing with. I guess the benefit here is in against an experienced operator. You know, the guy's had best part of 40 fights. The guy's 31 years old, and he's a southpaw. So these are learning fights in a sense. And I like to think that on the way up, a fighter, you know, a heavyweight prospect will fight a big guy in Daniel Martz, will fight a southpaw in Jason Bergman. You know, these are all the building blocks that you need to be a fully well-rounded individual. And that's the big positive here. You know, he's staying busy, and whilst he's staying busy, he's fighting different types of opponents, tall guys, southpaws, etc. My only slight feeling is that these fights could have happened 2 or 3 fights ago, you know. Maybe fighting Daniel Martz 3 or 4 fights ago and getting a big experience then would have been ideal. And I think it has been slightly disappointing for fans that this southpaw opponent was talked about, you know, in such terms that people were thinking it would be a real top-level fighter. I mean, a lot of the articles I saw were referring to some of the, you know, the real big names in the heavyweight division as the potential southpaw. And I think that's maybe led people astray and caused disappointment. I'm going to be honest, these aren't the opponents I'd have picked. They're not fights that, in my opinion, are likely to be competitive. They're not going to be the most entertaining matchups. In many ways, they are showcase fights for Joseph Parker. Looking at the guys' resumes, looking at the fact that they've both got multiple losses on their record and been stopped before, and been stopped, you know, by lesser opponents than Joseph Parker, certainly, you'd have to predict that if Joseph Parker turns up, barring disaster, you know, barring a broken hand, barring a cluster of heads, these are both going to end in relatively routine victories for Joseph Parker. For me, these 2 fighters, they're actually a step down in opposition from the guys Parker's been in with. Wouldn't you pick Bowie Tupu to beat both of these guys? I mean, Tupu's already beaten Jason Bergman, who's the higher rated one. Wouldn't you pick Cali Meehan to beat both of these guys? Wouldn't you pick Jason Petway to beat both of these guys? It's a step down in opposition. It's a step down in opposition. Looking at the positives, they're staying active, and they're facing different guys, tall guys, southpaws. I know I keep banging on about it, but I do think it's important. You know, I look at UK comparatives. You know, Tyson Fury's fighting Vladimir Klitschko for a world belt. and he's never faced someone who's 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" in a pro ring before. I view that as a negative. David Price, UK heavyweight prospect. I think first time he fought a southpaw was Tony Thompson, and he got knocked out. You know, for me, it would have been more beneficial for those guys, Fury and Price, if they'd had a fight like Jason Bergman 3 or 4 fights earlier than when they stepped up. And I think that's positive for Joseph Parker. You know, he's such a youngster in a division where people peak late. You know, he's a young man. He's got plenty of time on his side, and taking it slightly slowly isn't a bad thing as long as they keep him active. And it's no negative at all if by the time he hits world title level, Vladimir Klitschko's retired and gone. That is not a negative if that happens. You know, Klitschko possibly is one to avoid, and Team Parker can afford to wait because of Parker's youth. Nevertheless, from a fan perspective, there's a tinge of disappointment there, because I, like most others, are very excited about this Joseph Parker, and I guess when you're excited about a fighter, you want to see them tested and you want to see them in competitive fights. Let me know your thoughts. I do promise full breakdowns will come ahead of these 2 matchups when I've had more time to review the tapes. Let me know your thoughts on both of these guys. If you've enjoyed this video, give me the thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. Please share it on your social media, help get the word out there. And if you're new to the channel, thanks very much for tuning in. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, everyone.